morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces. Hopefully, everyone remembers me from last night. Those of you who lingered past when I left.
And didn't drink too much wine.
Exactly, didn't do too much wine. I think we have a little ray of sunshine in all this doom and gloom of the economy. I'm going to give you kind of a bit about myself and a bit about kind of our vision and how this is more or less kind of the culmination of my entire life and career in wine. I started in this business well over 10 years ago at the very bottom level, and through life is an interesting and rich journey. End up to be here in front of a few people in this room, and representing some of the most amazing winemakers in the world who I've followed and respected, and they again are people to kind of frame your mind. We're not simply selling wine. Anyone can do that. It's not special. We are representing the 1% of the 1% of winemaker. Thus, we are selling to the 1% of the 1%. Fantastically, while many traditional investments are performing very poorly, we have seen exponential growth year on year on year on year, and there is no end in sight. Every year, everyone thinks, how can it possibly increase in price? But with certain weather elements in Europe, in France and Italy, a decrease in crop yield exponentially year on year, a massive increase in demand and constriction in supply, it puts us in a very unique opportunity. If I'd attempted this anytime ever before, exactly right now, it would be impossible. Furthermore, another data point for us, the change of guard in these domains. Any of you who've been to France and Italy know things don't change very often, and when they do, it's very slowly. The new generation is taking over these businesses and bringing a level of open-mindedness that previously has not existed. Especially, I was living, as Mike said, abroad for quite a long time, working in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and then settling in Burgundy for many years. It's a very beautiful place. They're very protective. They call their patrimoine, their history. And so for a very long time, they have relied on one or two main players for import, sales, and distribution. Regardless of how many better offers they had in this time, it's a place in the world where relationships matter. And so again, until this time where we've had the parents retiring and the children wanting to shake things up, not possible. So now it's very possible. And again, I think given these weather patterns and the decrease in crop yields for the last several years, it's been quite substantial. Last year, we had a 50% crop loss in Burgundy specifically. This means price increase. Again, Asia is continuing to massively drive demand, especially for these high-end wines. It was also very perfect that I was able to form an association with this very, very exciting technology company. Some former Google executives from Middle East operations left to create roughly a technology platform to disrupt these distribution channels. At present, wine is sold to an importer. That importer then sells the wine to a distributor, and that distributor then sells the wine to retailers, restaurants, hotels, etc. The issue with this system is you have the vast bulk of product being placed in very few hands. So there's a wine, for example, that could sell for, say, €100 at the domain. Somehow, when it ends up on our shores, it's $1,500. This creates a massive gap between the product and the customer. Regardless of how wealthy you are or who you are, you simply cannot buy quantities of these wines. Maybe 6 here, 6 there, and we have no idea where they're from. Are they good condition? Are they dead? There's no way to know. So this company that we formed partnership with is the first to ever apply an NFT certificate to a bottle of wine. They are also doing many, many very exciting things, like disrupting the auction market by internalizing the auction process, taking business away from Sotheby's and Christie's, who again traditionally have held an iron fist grip on the secondary sales market. These companies typically take between 25 and 30% in commission, which again is quite a lot of money on top of an already inflated wine price. So this company has essentially internalized that market, slashed the price to undercut them. It's also creating a strong community of wine lovers. Before, the most we could interact with each other as wine lovers is wine dinners or something like this, put on by a distributor or winemaker. Quite rare. You have to be in the know. Not access. It's this huge separative gap. What this platform does is eliminate that system so that we can now sell directly from, say, a domain directly to the customer, cutting out the tier system and selling at a price and with a provenance guaranteed that is always guaranteed to be below market. Furthermore, this system has been so successful in the last 2 years. We're seeing wine domains who, again, all of these domains could work with literally anyone in the world. People beg and plead, and I've begged and plead over different times in the last several years. Work with us, work with us. No, no, we're not interested. You're nobody. And they have been joining en masse, rededicating stock year after year. For example, one offer of a wine, they allowed a $2 million worth of product. It was sold out in less than 24 hours and at 5 times the price they're used to selling it, but while still coming in under market. So again, it's more money to the producers and a greater saving to the customer. This communicative group, within this platform, again, gives us direct access to the winemaker. So it's, again, as a collector myself, it's quite putting off, to spend quite a lot of money on these wines and to hunt them and buy them in mass, to never be able to meet the winemaker. That's all changed with this platform. We're doing beautiful strings of events, Stad, Como, Miami, New York. So it's very, very exciting. So it's a bit of a vision, of ours, especially for the Miami market. It's very virgin. We've chosen this city. It's a city I love for a very, very long time, uh, because it's primed for new introduction. Fine wines. Again, traditionally the channels take them to New York or California, and that's it. So we're looking to completely disrupt this as well. Bring these wines to a new audience, which again, a new audience with in this instance is better than the old audience because they are used to hyper tracking prices. People in Miami have never experienced many of these wines, again because of rarity, lack of availability, etc. So we're bringing a new product at a very good price to a brand new marketplace of quite highly motivated buyers. So this is a bit of my vision and kind of the way we see things. Steve here is much more the technical guy. So rather than try and befuddle through our organizational structure, I'll defer it to Steve, I think, for the grisly details.
I get to do the boring part.
Exactly. Voila.
So, all right. So yeah. So thank you all. I know we had a lot of us had a chance to meet last night, and we got to talk about a lot of different things, and it was actually wonderful to meet all of you all last night, and very fortunate I had a common friend in common with Kyle. Actually, Kyle's attorney, who's a friend of mine, who introduced us. And myself, just a little bit of background. I know I described it to some of the people last night, but I've been in the financial services industry for 30 years, started 6 or 7 years at Arthur Andersen. Then I went to Morgan Stanley for a few years, and then I moved to Europe, where myself with some business partners, I was invited to be a business partner in a venture in Spain, and we brought direct market access. This was late 90s, early 2000s, so it was, level 2 trading, all these things that people understand that was a big thing, all the ECNs and all that, and we were able to bring a direct market access to all the European banks, funds, traders, to the equity markets, where previously they were calling New York or London and executing orders by phone or on Bloomberg, but they weren't actually getting any direct, basically able to manage their trades directly on their own computer. So we created a technology company that and there's other technical details I don't need to get into right now, but we were able to connect them. We created that was my first venture into creating my own broker dealer. And we were able to then execute on the U.S. equity exchanges for all these groups. So the point of the whole story I kind of was bringing that up was that was my first venture into M&A, investment banking, and all that kind of stuff, in which we sold the company to a publicly traded. Percent by a holding company in Dubai. Okay? And mostly more than anything else, because the founder of CruRated was, as he said, at the top levels of Middle East operations for Google, and he was already living there, and he probably had investors that he had lined up in the Middle East and things like that, so he just left it in Dubai. They own 76% of CruRated. CruRated raised, it's the company itself raised.
Just finished their second capital raise of 6 million for an
Right.
evaluation of 50.
Right. So they just did a second capital raise. As you were saying, they did about 15 million or so in income, if I remember correctly. In second year, which is pretty darn good. And so, as Kyle was saying, one of the things that they're offering, through this auction sites and all that kind of thing, is more of a direct access. So he was talking about commissions and things like that. And the way it morally operates is that the either CruRated or Kyle, they get a percent of the spread rather than having a spread and then another markup and then a commission, right? So it's going. That's why the prices are at market or below, because there's no real markups beyond what the people pay at an auction, and then whatever the base price is, then that's what's shared with CruRated, or in our case, would be what CruRated Americas. One of the things that Kyle negotiated recently, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, he was in France, met with Alfonso Gaetano, who's the founder of CruRated, and that's to acquire 10% of the holding company for 10 million, which does obviously raise the valuation, fairly significantly. However, in exchange for that, we have, let's say, Chimera has complete exclusivity for basically the entire Western Hemisphere, North and South America. And as we know, probably about 50%, if not more, of all wine sales, fine wines in the world, happen in this country. And so, so that is a huge opportunity to have exclusivity, and it's unilateral. So the Kantara has exclusivity for the rights to CruRated using the CruRated name in the Americas, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use CruRated to do business. So, which is another advantage. It's I found it a little surprising he was able to give that up so easily, but he did. So,
Slight
um,
hesitation.
yeah, I think he sees where the opportunity is, and we all, as we've met Kyle and got to talk to him, we know about his passion for this, and obviously Alfonso believes in Kyle and his ability to take this thing forward. So, and of course, if that happens, CruRated Limited, which is the UK-based company, makes their share of everything that happens here. So, so basically, that's CruRated in a nutshell. One of the things that Kyle mentioned last night, like that, is not just the ability to buy some of these exclusive fine wines that you might not be able to get easily because they're not marketed or they're not sold through the major distributors that we all know. The other thing also is the ability to buy um, fractional shares of a barrel, right? So,
Which will be the first platform to ever
right,
offer this
yeah.
technology.
Well, I mean, I think they did a couple of those sales already.
Exactly.
Yeah, and or even an entire percentage of a production of a vineyard, things like that, right? And that's a big deal, right? So what that kind of segues and leads us into part of the next thing, and that is that the U.S. company, which would be Substance Vino Co. And Substance Vino Co. would basically be the licensed distributor, importer, exporter, and basically everything that has to do with the operational side of the business in the U.S. Right. The the next step, which is already starting to happen, I know you've had several conversations, and that is the hospitality industry, which is massive. So imagine you have some of these super high end places like, let's say, like a Cipriani or something like that, that can now has access to wines that they may not have been able to get access to because they're using Southern Wine and Spirits or they're using one of the other big distributors, and they don't have access to these wines. But not just that. And so then Cipriani could then buy a barrel, 2 barrels, a percentage of production for all the restaurants they have in the country. But not only that, they can even white label it. So it could be Cipriani, Sauvignon Blanc, by the name of the vineyard, right? So, there's a lot of flexibility. And if being able to do that, think about the potential, the Four Seasons, Ritz Carltons, all these high end places and being able to basically sell en masse and things like that. So
So I
there's
may
a
just to frame a
yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Go
So
ahead,
to give
please.
you kind of a for
Yeah.
instance in terms of market availability, especially in Miami. Say your Four Seasons, a surf club, Thomas Keller, big name, should have no problem to acquire as much as you want. It's not the case. For example, one of the producers in our portfolio who's recently signed exclusive as of last month, they're used to getting 6 bottles, maybe 12 if they're very lucky in 1 year. We may now offer them 10 cases, 15 cases, 20 cases, as they like, we will get. And no more of the traditional importer who's, oh, you want one good bottle of wine, you have to take 10 cases of shit rosé. That's finished. So again, these people are incredibly eager. We've already begun relationships with Faena, Four Seasons, Tom Ford, Dior to supply wine for their events in Miami locally. So again, to give you the scale of the way things will increase, should be useful.
Right.
Continue.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and it's good because obviously he's the one with boots on the ground, so he can tell you who he's been talking to and things like that. So yeah, but obviously conceptually and everything like that, and just generally as business people and everything like that, it's not a hard thing to understand the advantages and the concept and all that. So there's also obviously through the CruRated website and things that are introduced through the U.S. or Caribbean and South America. There's also the the gains that the company would make on the direct to consumer markets as well, right? So that's another advantage. And so we have hospitality, we have import, export. Another thing will become important. I think, Jeremy, let's move forward. We talked about growth potential markets. This is kind of the business structure we were talking about, and I'll get into some of the other ones in a moment. Just one more.
While they're doing this, I want to frame a bit about the increase as we're just examining the decrease in the stock market performance the last several years. Wine is at this level is very much the opposite, especially with Burgundy. Every year, the ceiling is shattered again and again and again. Conservatively, between red and whites, year on year, 65% price increase for the last 5 years. No end in sight. One of the producers in our profile who has trusted us is quite an artist. He's a bit difficult, but he's very exacting. He was named winemaker of the year last year, and Decanter just named his domain #2 in the world. His wine 3-4 years ago, you could purchase a Von Romanée Village, nice, not cheap, €100. That wine today sells for $1,750, and there's no end in sight. And he is simply one of a group of, I think it's closer to 60 now, producers of this caliber. So again, the margins that we have and the situation that exists, it again makes it, I think, quite attractive going into what I think we all agree will be a bit of a downturn over the next couple of years.
So yeah. So as you were saying, there's just there's a lot of possibilities here. There's it's a continuously growing market and things like that. So when we start talking about, we were talking about CruRated and the way that the money is made, let's say through CruRated, through let's call it profit sharing. But there's also basically just regular straight up commission sales based on a direct markup from, let's say, a vineyard to either for hospitality or on some other purposes of sales. Us being in finance, I try to find a way to put it. So I call it the difference between brokering and dealing. And as we know, broker dealers. So brokering basically is more of just an agency. You're putting together a seller and a buyer. And you're getting a commission or a fee in the middle. And then there's more like what I didn't know a better way to put it, but I call it like a dealer kind of thing where you're buying inventory in bulk, and then you're getting the markup yourself based on market price of that wine, during that particular time. So you can go in, buy large volumes of a certain wine or a certain percentage of production in anticipation that we know there's sales coming up, and you just did one yesterday, and so it was a $400,000 sale.
The same producer, Charles Lechaud.
Right.
Again, we
So-
acquired it a month or two ago, and then I have a single buyer from Asia. He called me last week. He said, "I want all of it, 400,000 wire transfer next day."
Right.
It's like a name.
Right. So it is a hot market, especially for collectors and all that kind of thing. I think everybody can understand it, but that's kind of how I broke down kind of different ways where Substance Vehicle would make money is basically either on buying inventory and then reselling it, or just basically as an agent between a buyer and a seller. Then there's the auctions and things like that. There's also, I'll briefly mention, events, right? So it could be either destination events to go to France and then participate in an auction in Burgundy, in-house, and go visit a couple of vineyards, and then they have an auction, things like that. There's also events. There's two events.
If I may jump into events.
Yeah.
So to give you a perspective, CruRated is doing some very beautiful events for the last 2 years in very pretty places. I looked at it and I said, "Man, I think that these are quite undervalued." And he said, "What do you mean?" And we initiated contact a couple months ago with a high-end events company here in Miami. Within a month, we were able to arrange a string of 3 events with ticket sales alone at 1.5 million, 20,000 per person, string of 3 events. With our association, because quite a lot of our value is the
That's
access.
before they even go to auction.
Exactly. Before a bottle of wine is sold. So a lot of the value here is access, because before these things weren't possible, even for Sotheby's to arrange. With CruRated, anyone in the portfolio, 3 months notice, we have them here, we have them there. anywhere in the world we want them, we have them.
Yeah. So as he was saying, so yeah, so that's another potential thing. As he was saying, not just that, there are companies that want to sponsor some of these events. So there's also, like you were talking
We're able to
about,
make nice inroads with
private jet,
private jet aviation industry, as
yeah,
well as yacht industry as well.
and they're willing to pay for everything that goes around, let's say, producing the event. And then the ticket sales basically go to the vineyards, to the company, and things like that. So it's an interesting model, to say the least. As he was saying, markups, as Kyle said earlier, markups. By the time you buy a bottle in the store, things like that, and nothing's gonna, it's disruptive in a way, but nothing's gonna take away from the big mega conglomerate, distributors. But they're selling the common wines that people know every single day, and everybody wants that can, that they can buy, anywhere, and they're familiar with. Some people are more comfortable buying what they're familiar with, but
And
collectors
this is key,
and yeah,
because when
right,
they approached me with this business to business opportunity, I said, Southern Wine and Spirits is the fifth largest privately held company in the U.S. I think at 23 billion. So I have no desire to compete directly with a company worth 23 billion dollars. So thankfully, our portfolio is 90% non-competitive with anyone operating locally.
So at the end of the day, we Colin had a lot of discussions about it, and because obviously when we think about investments and things like that, we start looking into, okay, what kind of revenues can we expect, what kind of margins can we expect. But we're talking about gross margins on the low side, 25-30% gross margins, and this is not a very labor intensive business. It doesn't need, the company doesn't need 30 employees. It doesn't need, with a crew of 5 or 6, or let's say less than 10, can run this thing pretty easily. And that includes a handful of sales guys, and most of them work straight off of commissions based on sales. So there's not really too much expense on that side as well. So it's a pretty lean operation when you think about it from that particular perspective. And then the next thing, Jeremy, can you go? Jeremy, you go one more. And then so another thing that came up, and it was something that I discussed. Initially hadn't really talked about it. It was an idea I had myself, liking real estate and all that kind of thing. I brought up the idea of storage, which actually in South Florida, there's only one or two like known wine storage. They're bonded. They may be bonded warehouses and things like that. They're climate controlled, but there's only a couple.
It's very new to the market.
Yeah, and there's one company. It's a national chain. They're called Domain, and I think they're based out of New Jersey or New York or something like that. I don't remember exactly where, but they have 6 or 7 locations around the country. But the closest one, let's say for instance to Miami, is Pompano Beach, right? So I think there's opportunity there. It may be something a little bit later on when there's the business has built itself and there's a large client base either locally or things like that, where now they actually need some wine storage, right?
And that's again, thankfully for us at this stage, these wines are very high end in the portfolio. So really the physical footprint is very, very small. I mean, we could fit, a standard kind of low end offering. It would normally be 5 pallets in dollar value in a single pallet. So again, it's quite lean, which is nice for us shipping as well as storage.
Back. Yeah. No, keep going.
At least I'm not the only one who's bad at the technology.
Well, I can't control it from here, so that's the problem. So yeah, go back one more. So one of the other things that this is also a pretty important part of the business, and it sounds like a lot, but it's a lot of it has to do also with opportunity, right? And I know Bob was talking about that before, and I know some of us had those conversations last night. The economy slowed down a little bit or a lot in certain respects. In certain respects, it hasn't changed all that much, but there are definitely opportunities that are going to be coming. And one of those is Kyle has had several conversations, and let's call it a handshake deal with one of I guess it's a vineyard, but it's a vineyard, but it's more like a producer.
So we went into this trip in Burgundy, with with certain expectations with CruRated, and anyone who knows small villages in Europe, they're like knitting circles. Everyone talks, and especially when you're coming with money, people really talk. So again, with this unique situation we're in, with these decrease in crop yields, decrease in income for the domains, it's a labor-intensive and very cost-intensive process to run a vineyard. I mean, you have to actually have people to work it. You have the facility itself. So we have focused ourselves on a maison projects. So a maison, as opposed to a domain, is someone who buys their grapes, does not own the vineyard land. But we're seeing these before, these were considered lower class and you couldn't charge very much money. Now, as Burgundy, the prices have exponentially increased. I mean, 1 acre, 5, 10 million of land. So obviously, this prices almost everyone out of the market. So you see these maison projects popping up more and more, and we're now at the point where there is no difference in price. It's seen the same to all the consumers. So the best part about this is that we don't have to pay to run a vineyard operation. All we need is the couvry space and the winemaker, and that's it. So we went into this trip. There was one conversation I wanted to have. We ended up closing 2 maison projects at 50% less than we anticipated to spend. So quite cool. We kept all the winemakers on, and the best part about all of it is with our association with CruRated. After we rebrand and increase the price, which again we have calculated as a roughly 50% increase in revenues in the first year of rebrand, we can shed, if we need to, the entire existing customer base, bring them to CruRated platform where there's a much higher net worth individual, a much higher end offering. So again, the normal growing pains of a new business after a rebrand, we simply do not have any of them.
So yeah. So as you can see, very interesting opportunity. So the idea being, as I was saying, it's actually to acquire these maisons, right? And that is also part of that offshore component we talked about because these are offshore. But at the end of the day, there's opportunity. There's going to be more coming, and there's definitely some probably in Italy as well, and things like that. And there'll be opportunities that will around, and maybe even in Argentina or Chile and things like that. But the idea is basically to acquire, and some of these, as I was saying, the wines themselves are undervalued because they're very small batch, they're not as well known, or because the locals there, they're used. In France, wine has definitely certain limitations and how much markups and how much you can sell them for and things like that. So they're very limited in how they can sell their wines and the prices that they can charge for them and all that kind of things, or the markups that they can put. Whereas this eliminates those kind of problems. So we can acquire some of these maisons, as Kyle is saying, and then go and rebrand them and then put them more at real market prices for the quality that they are. Right?
I'd like to just speak slightly on the rebrand. Right. So my family, we a bit international. My sister and mother quite active in the art world. It's important to me at all aspects of the branding process for these new domains, as we want to exponentially increase price, is to have an artistic component, attached to them. We recently signed last week after 8 months of painstaking begging. Very amazing photographer Tyler Shields, featured in Sotheby's, Christie's galleries. The larger prints go for between 150,000, 250,000. He works with Hermes and celebrities in LA. He will be doing the first ever wine project of his career with us for our rebrand. So again, it gives us immediate credence to the level and quality that we're speaking to.
So getting back, So in any case, getting back to the business, so Precision Viticulture is basically the operator of these acquisitions. But the last component, because we've gone over on time, so
I'm gonna talk.
So the last component, really, we were thinking about, well, how do we manage these acquisitions? There's 2 different ways. There's obviously the acquisitions of some of these maisons and things like that. There's even potential vineyard acquisitions, things like that. But that's a much bigger business. But in addition to that, obviously, like art, there are lots of collectors. So there's a possibility of collecting or buying portfolios of wines. And so the last component, which was at the end of organizational chart is kind of, I guess the best way to say is a fund, right? Component in order to give shares or fractional shares of portfolios of wines and or to acquire these maisons and these businesses, offshore. So really, that's the entire, the entire vision of the company, and the way that we're looking at taking this thing forward and trying to make sure that we can execute Kyle's vision the way he sees it. There's a lot going on, but there's also
It's a little world we're creating now.
interestingly enough, they kind of operate. Some of these things operate on their own, and basically being some of it now technology driven. As I said, it keeps things a little leaner, and having people that you can acquire the museum, but they stay. The staff stays on board, so it's more about a management thing. And a lot of this also has to do with the fact that the newest generations, they just don't want to be in their family business anymore. So that's why some of these things become available. But anyway, that kind of wraps it up, because we are over on our time. But that's it. I think we got a pretty good picture for everybody.
So hopefully you guys will decide to maybe join us in our little dream. So thank you so much for your additional time, and I wish you all the best success.